movie opens with a man in a tent sharpening his pickaxe. He's a climber camped in the snowy Karakoram Mountains in India. Braving the cold, he ventures out to scale the mountain. It's a tough climb, but he pushes through, using his pickaxe to pull himself up. At the summit, he stumbles upon a mysterious sight, a glowing sphere encased in ice. Intrigued, he moves closer to investigate. He takes off his shade and moves closer to the sphere. He places his left hand on it and proceeds to strike it with his pickaxe. But he is overwhelmed by a blinding light from the sphere, so he falls down and loses consciousness. After a while, he wakes up confused. The glowing sphere has vanished. Puzzled, he pulls off his glove and sees a bizarre scar on his hand. Fast forward to the present day, where we meet Helen, a microbiologist and lecturer at Princeton University. After engaging her students in a lively lecture, she returns home to her stepson, Jacob. When she calls him down for dinner, Jacob shows his stubborn streak and refuses. As Helen starts back downstairs, her phone rings. An unknown caller chillingly confirms her location and warns her that someone is on their way to fetch her, promising explanations later. She is still trying to get answers from the caller when she hears a knock at her door. She opens the door and sees a man standing at her doorpost with several other cars in the vicinity. The man tells her that she is in federal custody and has to come with them immediately. Urging Jacob to grab his coat and stay with a neighbor until she returns, Helen leaves with the men. She finds herself whisked away into a helicopter, where she encounters other scientists equally clueless about their presence there. The helicopters land at a strange location, and the scientists are ushered inside. They are told to leave their cell phones and cameras behind, but Helen manages to secretly keep her phone hidden in her breast pocket. As she is trying to hide it, Michael calls out to her, and the scientists are led to a conference room. There, they are told the reason for their summoning. Michael explains that an object is spotted moving rapidly beyond Jupiter's orbit by the Space Guard program, and according to their preliminary calculations, the object will inevitably collide with their planet. They are told that the object is projected to impact and destroy all lives on Earth in 78 minutes. They have been assembled to come up with survival plans. After the meeting, Helen goes to the bathroom to secretly call Jacob and tell him what's likely to happen soon and what he should do, but she is caught in the act by a military officer who tearfully requests to borrow her phone to call her family. Helen, together with the other scientists and military officers, head to the sphere's location. Upon arrival, they witness the object moving erratically, wreaking havoc and injuring nearby people. The group disembarks from the helicopter and cautiously approaches the sphere. As it rotates, they all stop, transfixed. Helen, driven by curiosity, steps forward alone towards the sphere. She spots a masculine figure and extends her hand for a handshake, but just then the military officers open fire. Helen holds on to the figure, and as the military shots hit, blood from the figure's wounds splatter onto her spacesuit. Suddenly, a giant robot emerges from the sphere, unleashing a high-pitched sound that disables all electronics in the vicinity. Amid the chaos, the wounded alien uttered the command, Klaatu Barada Nikto, immediately deactivating the robot's aggressive stance. After the intense moment, things return to normal, and the injured man is rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery in order to remove the bullet. While in the surgery theater, the surgeon notices that the figure has pale flesh with a texture like a whale blubber. The skin keeps falling off as the surgeon goes deeper into it with his blade. He successfully extracts the bullet, and the gray flesh keeps falling off. He has no other option but to completely extract everything. Following the surgery, the alien is put into an incubator, and it ages into an adult male that looks just like Klaatu, the mountaineer from the first scene. While recovering in the incubator, Klaatu suddenly wakes up and begins convulsing. Helen rushes to his side, doing everything she can to help him. As the convulsions subside, Helen introduces herself and assures him that they were only trying to help. To Helen's surprise, Klaatu repeats some of the things she had just said, showing that he can understand and communicate in English. Meanwhile, the president and vice president have been taken to secure locations and are being represented by the United States Secretary General Regina Jackson. Regina meets Dr. Helen and other scientists, who explain the state of the being after analyzing the tissue samples harvested from the body. She requests to see the being and is taken into the room where he is kept. Regina introduces herself and goes ahead to interrogate him. The being introduces himself and reveals that he was an emissary from a network of advanced civilizations that coexist with humans in the cosmos. Regina tries to get Klaatu to share his mission, telling him that she represents the interests of world leaders. But Klaatu remains adamant that she doesn't speak for the entire human race. Frustrated, Regina instructs the scientist to drug Klaatu, but Michael objects, warning against such drastic measures. As the scientists debate on what to do, Helen volunteers to handle the situation herself. The scientists reluctantly agree, not knowing that Helen has no intention of drugging Klaatu. As she walks into the lab to get the drug, a man comes in and hands her a drug, telling her not to worry about getting the drug, as it has already been prepared. Helen pretends to go get a syringe and takes a water injection that she had hidden in her pocket. She goes into the lab and pretends to fill the syringe with the drug while actually filling it with water. She injects Klaatu with water and whispers for him to run. She is led out of the lab by military officers while Klaatu is wheeled into another room for interrogation. During the interrogation, Klaatu asserts dominance over his interrogator with a strategic shock, seizing control of his mind. At this moment, he extracts information on how to escape. Quickly, he takes the man's clothes and puts them on himself, ready to sneak away. He then emits a high-pitched sound that causes widespread confusion and uncertainty among the people in the area. Amidst the commotion, Helen manages to steal a sample of the alien's flesh and leave the building unnoticed. Klaatu escapes and finds himself in the train station. He goes to the bathroom and discovers that he's bleeding from the site of the gunshot injury. He falls and passes out. Helen gets an odd phone call asking her to come to the train station to aid a man claiming to be her patient, despite her not being a medical doctor. The caller explains that the man has specifically asked for her, believing she possesses a medication he needs. Without hesitation, Helen quickly leaves her home, bringing Jacob along with her. When they arrive, they see Klaatu, who was the supposed patient. Klaatu asks Helen to drive him to a specific location, and on the way, he requests the small container that Helen is carrying in her breast pocket. Inside the container is the sample of the alien's flesh that Helen had taken earlier. Klaatu applies the alien flesh to the wound, and to Helen's amazement, the wound heals immediately. In this turn of events, the US military tracks down the giant robot and decides to take it out with a missile strike. As the jets close in on their target, the robot grabs them and tears them to pieces. The remaining pilots, realizing they are outmatched, radios their superiors to warn them that the robot is too powerful to destroy with conventional weapons. Meanwhile, Helen, Klaatu, and Jacob are seen in her car. She pulls over at a McDonald's. Klaatu meets with Mr. Wu, an Asian man who happens to actually be an alien that has been on Earth for a long time. They exchange pleasantries, and Mr. Wu tells Klaatu that the human race is very hostile, and any attempt to intercede with them would be futile because they are very destructive and won't change. Klaatu says he'll begin the process of destruction while they make plans for their departure, but Mr. Wu tells him that he's staying. Klaatu reminds him that he'll die if he stays, but Mr. Wu is not willing to change his mind. He says he'll remain on Earth as he has grown to love the people. As the conversation with Mr. Wu comes to an end, Klaatu leaves with Helen. Helen drives to a forest, and Klaatu leaves the car and goes into the woods, leaving Jacob to wonder who he was. Helen assures him that Klaatu is a friend, and they're just giving him a ride. She gets out of the car to go check on Klaatu, and instructs Jacob to lock the car and not open it for anyone except her. She sees Klaatu commanding a sphere to collect specimens of animal species in order to preserve them for later reintroduction to the Earth. Helen, being scared, runs back to the car and finds Jacob furious and ready to go home. Helen runs after him to stop him, but they both stop when they see a glowing sphere moving up into the sky. They stand there in awe, not knowing what to make of what they have just seen. Klaatu emerges from the woods and tells Helen that he has to return to the city. Helen presses him for more information, but Klaatu is vague, only saying that the planet was dying due to the actions of the human race. Klaatu makes it clear that he has come to save the planet, not the people. Helen pleads with him to not destroy the human race, insisting that they can change. Klaatu insists that the damage is already done. Just then, a police officer appears, pointing a gun at them. He demands that they place their hands on the car, but Klaatu refuses to comply. The officer fires a warning shot, but Klaatu remains defiant. Using his powers, Klaatu sends Helen's car barreling towards the officer, who is knocked to the ground. Klaatu rushes to the officer and inserts something into his mouth, then touches his head. Miraculously, the officer revives, to the amazement of Helen and Jacob. Klaatu has used his powers to heal the officer. With the situation calmed down, Helen and Jacob are left to reflect on the extraordinary events they had just witnessed. After hearing Klaatu's concern about the future of the human race, Helen offers to take Klaatu to a respected figure in the human society. She has tried reasoning with the leaders, but they don't comply. Helen takes Klaatu to Professor Carl Barnhart, who tries to convince him to give the human race a chance to understand that they have to change. However, Klaatu is skeptical about Professor Carl being able to convince humanity to change its ways. Meanwhile, Jacob is left alone in the living room. He is watching television when he sees the news about Klaatu being wanted by US authorities. He quickly calls the authorities to come and arrest Klaatu. As Helen, Klaatu, and Professor Barnhart are engrossed in their discussion, they spot a helicopter approaching Barnhart's house. Helen, Klaatu, and Jacob quickly dash into the woods for safety. However, during their escape, and while arguing with Jacob, Helen is captured by the military and taken away in the helicopter. With no one else around, Jacob is left alone with Klaatu and sees him destroy 2 helicopters. Panicked, Jacob runs across the bridge and slips. As he tumbles over the edge, Klaatu catches him by the arm, saving him from the deadly fall. Meanwhile, in a bold move, the US military tries to break into the giant robot named Gort with a drill. Sadly, the scientist sent to do this gets attacked by tiny bug-like things from the robot, and they don't let him out. He doesn't survive. When they see how strong Gort is, they try to blow it up, but the explosion doesn't hurt it. Instead, Gort turns into a huge swarm of tiny, flying bug robots that eat up everything made by humans, destroying the entire place. Later, Regina sees Helen again and asks her if she really thinks she can make Klaatu stop the destruction. Helen says they should let her try. Regina tells her she's on her own, but then Michael says he'll go with her to help. Jacob, now understanding Klaatu's peaceful intentions, reaches out to Helen, asking her to meet them at the cemetery. It's there that Jacob, holding on to a sliver of hope, pleads with Klaatu to use his powers to resurrect his father. Klaatu, with a heavy heart, explains that such miracles are beyond his capabilities, leaving Jacob to face the harsh reality of his loss. As Helen and Michael arrive at the cemetery, they're greeted by the sight of Jacob in tears. Helen steps in to offer comfort, wrapping him in a reassuring embrace. She then turns to Klaatu, earnestly requesting a chance for humanity to mend its ways. Finally convinced by her plea, they set off towards the city, their journey marked with urgency. Their resolve is quickly tested as they encounter a military checkpoint. With no choice but to push through, they manage to bypass the blockade, initiating a tense chase with the military. However, in an unexpected turn, the military's pursuit gradually fades, allowing Helen, Michael, Jacob, and Klaatu to continue their mission, a small victory in their quest for redemption. Feeling a sense of danger due to the deserted surroundings, Helen urgently tells Michael to stop the car, sensing that something isn't right. But before he can bring the car to a halt, an explosion erupts, instantly killing Michael. Amidst the chaos, Klaatu, Helen, and Jacob quickly get out of the car and flee to safety. Once they find a moment of respite, Jacob notices he's bleeding from his nose and alerts Helen before losing consciousness. Klaatu examines him and grimly announces that Jacob is on the verge of death. In a desperate plea, Helen begs Klaatu to save her stepson. Responding to her plea, Klaatu performs a miraculous act. He carefully draws out the harmful insects from Jacob's body and takes them into his own, demonstrating his extraordinary powers in a bid to rescue the boy. Jacob regains consciousness just in time to see Klaatu departing. With a determined stride, Klaatu enters the midst of the swarm, approaching the sphere. He places his hand upon it, and in that moment, his body is absorbed, leading to the swarm's dissolution. The world pauses, a silent witness to the event, as all electronics momentarily cease to function and the giant sphere ascends, leaving Earth behind. With Klaatu's sacrifice, the planet breathes a sigh of relief. The Earth is saved, and gradually, life returns to its usual rhythm, restoring normalcy once again. What do you think of remakes of classic films like this one? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next out-of-this-world recap.